Hi, I'm Kanupriya Sharma from GMATQuizMaster and I'm very excited to present our first RC passage explanation. This is a hard humanities passage from OG. Those of you who have already tried this passage would understand why it is hard. Dense, layered, difficult to follow. However, the passage in itself is not the main problem. The main problem is in the way we try to read it. In this video, I am going to read the passage in the way anyone who truly wants to understand the passage should read, word by word, chunk by chunk, building meaning in real time. Before we start, I would suggest solving the passage on your own first. The passage will be visible to you soon on your screen. You can pause the video and solve the passage. Then, as we go through it together, take a note of the differences. What did you miss when you were reading the passage? Is there anything that you could have understood better? Does reading like this help you understand the passage better? Do you know what should be your expectation from passage understanding before you move to the questions? After that, try solving the questions. Same passage, different reading style. That changes everything. Here is the passage. All right, let's start reading the passage. It is an odd but indisputable fact. Let's stop here to understand this portion first before we proceed to read the entire sentence. This portion says that it refers to the fact here. So we are going to read about some fact, but what is already given to us is that this fact is odd but indisputable. Now, odd means something weird or something unexpected. However, there's a contrast word but. The contrast is that it is indisputable. It is not up for debate. The fact that we are going to discuss is weird, but it's still indisputable. It is not debatable. All right, let's read the fact now that the 17th century English women. So the fact is about these English women from this time period. It is not about any other segment, it is about this particular segment of English women from the 17th century. What about them? Who? So these English women from the 17th century are generally regarded. Generally regarded means it is not universally accepted. It is not something that everyone accepts, but it is something that is generally believed. So these women are generally regarded as among the forerunners of modern feminism. So these women are usually, they are generally considered to be among the forerunners of modern feminism. That is, what is the forerunners of modern feminism? What would that mean? So modern feminism is feminism as it looks now, the current status of feminism. Now these women are generally regarded as among means that there is a group of people who are regarded as forerunners of modern feminism. Now, these women are a part of this group. They are not the only forerunners, they are among the forerunners. Forerunners means people who laid the foundation, who started that, laid the foundation. So, what does this mean? This means that these English women can be considered to be sort of feminists. They would support feminism, right? Because they're generally regarded as among the forerunners of modern feminism. All right, so this is a description given to us about these women. Let's read the fact now. So the fact is that these 17th century English women are almost all means a huge majority, maybe 95%, 98%, 99%, not all. They are almost all identified with the royalist side. Now, what is this royalist side? Let's read further in the conflict between royalists and parliamentarians known as the English Civil Wars. Okay, so this is talking about some English Civil War, which was a conflict between royalists and parliamentarians. So there were these two sides, one and two. And almost all of these 17th century English women identify themselves with the royalist side, with one of these two sides. There are two sides, they identify, almost all of them identify them with one of these sides. All right, so this is the fact given to us that these 17th century women who should be feminist, they identify themselves with royalist side, not with the parliamentarian side. And the author started by saying that this is a fact which is odd but indisputable. Now we understand why it could be indisputable. Probably there is some evidence because of which we say that this is not up for debate. But why is it odd? Why is the author saying that this fact is odd? What is so odd about it? We do not have that answer. So Before proceeding to the next question, to the next sentence, we should have this question in our mind that the author has said that this fact is odd, but we do not have a reasoning given to us to justify why the author is saying that this fact is odd. Rest, everything seems to make sense, but this question is unanswered. So we will proceed to the next sentence with this question. So a reasoning has been given to us. Let's see what the reasoning is for. Royalist ideology. So ideology followed by this royalist side is often associated with. So now we are saying that it is often associated with something. We are not saying that it is definitely or always associated with this. It is often linked with something. And this is important because when we are making a claim that it is definitely related to something, that gives you a different understanding. However, that certainty is not here. It is said that it is often associated with. So it is very often, it is very frequently linked to something else. It may not always be true, right? So that scope is clear with the use of often associated with. The radical patriarchalism. Okay, so let's stop here. What is meant by this? Radical means something extreme. Patriarchalism means something related to patriarchy. Patriarchy or male dominance. So this royalist side is often associated with, it is often linked with extreme form of patriarchy, extreme form of male dominance. Now, we know that reasoning is being given. We know that we have not yet read the complete sentence, but can you connect this royalist ideology, this link of royalist ideology, even if it is not a definitive link, not a universal link, but can you connect this link of royalist ideology with this radical patriarchalism to why the fact is odd, why so many women associating themselves with royalist ideology, which can actually be linked with patriarchy or male dominance. Do you now understand that why the author said that this fact is odd? Yes, it kind of makes sense that why women who actually led to who kind of started the modern feminism, why did they associate themselves with one side which is often associated with something related to male dominance? The ideology is often related to that. So that is something confusing, and that could have made this fact odd. So we may get our answer to why this fact is odd here. Let's read further. So royalist ideology is often associated with the radical patriarchalism of 17th century political theorist Robert Filmer. So this radical patriarchalism was given by 17th century, same time period. Here also we have 17th century, and this person was a political theorist. So this person gave this radical patriarchalism, and royalist ideology is often associated with this. Now let's read further. A patriarchalism. So now we are defining this patriarchalism. We get to know something more about this patriarchalism. Patriarchalism that equates family and kingdom. So as per this patriarchalism, family and kingdom can be equated. They are parallel and asserts the divinely ordained absolute power of the king. So just absorb this part. It asserts the divinely ordained, the God given absolute power. Absolute power means this is the only power, this is the absolute power of the king. So the king is all powerful. That is what this says, that God has made king all powerful in the kingdom, and by analogy of the male head of the household. So this is what this patriarchalism means, that family is almost parallel to kingdom. In kingdom, we have the absolute power of king, God given absolute power. Similarly, in family, the male head has the absolute power, and that is given by God. So, this is the male dominance that this patriarchalism supports. And again, you can link it back to why these women were associating themselves with royalist ideology then, if it supported so much of patriarchalism. Let's read further. Now, here we had a reason that since royalist ideology is often associated with this patriarchalism, and this portion was a description of the patriarchalism. So let's read the actual sentence now, that since royalist ideology is often associated with this patriarchalism, historians have been understandably puzzled by the fact. Now, because of this reason, the author is saying that historians have been understandably puzzled. Now, what does this word understandably show here? Understandably shows that the author agrees to this confusion. The author is saying that yes, this confusion is justified. I understand how confusing the situation is. They are not just reporting it, the author is showing their own consent here, that yes, their own opinion here, that yes, it is understandable why this confusion exists, why the historians have been confused. So the author is saying that historians have been understandably puzzled by the fact that royalist women, so again, we are talking about the same segment of women, royalist women, wrote the earliest extended criticisms of the absolute subordination of women in marriage. So now historians are thinking that why, if these women associated themselves with royalist side, and almost all of them associated themselves with royalist side, which is kind of linked with patriarchalism, why did they write the earliest, that is the first few extended criticisms? They are criticizing something. What are they criticizing? They are criticizing the absolute subordination of women in marriage, that why women are considered secondary in that arrangement. So why are they less powerful? So, yes, definitely. Now you read it, you will also feel that yes, here we are saying that royalist ideology is linked with something that makes male head the absolute power. So, why the women who joined this group, who associated themselves with royalist ideology, why did they criticize the same thing? Right? They are criticizing the same thing here. And what else did they do? The earliest systematic assertions of women's rational and moral equality with men. So they again wrote something else, the first few systematic assertions of women's rational and moral equality. So they said that women are equal with men in terms of, if we consider these two aspects, women are equal. They advocated for that men women equality. So these two things are something that are puzzling these historians, that if these women have associated themselves with royalist side, which is linked to this kind of patriarchy, why were they writing such feminist works, the earliest feminist works? The other link that you can draw here is the first sentence said that these women are generally regarded as among the forerunners of modern feminism. Now, if you see, they wrote the earliest extended criticism of women's subordination, and they wrote the earliest systematic assertion of women's equality. So these two things are linked. These two things also show that yes, that is why they may be considered. This is adding to the fact that to the belief that they were among the forerunners of modern feminism. They started writing these kind of works, and maybe that is why they were said to be among the forerunners of modern feminism. So, this is the entire puzzle that has been presented by the author. If you summarize all this, you know that English civil wars were going on. There were two sides, royalists and parliamentarians. We do not know much about parliamentarians. Take a note of it. We have not been told anything about what parliamentarian ideology looked like, but we know that royalist ideology is often associated with patriarchy. Still, so many women who are considered to be the forerunners of modern feminism, so many women associated themselves with this royalist side, and this is what has puzzled the historians. Let's read further. Some historians, so now we are talking about some historians, have questioned the facile equation of royalist ideology with Filmer patriarchalism. Okay, so here we read in the previous sentence, we read that royalist ideology is often associated with this patriarchalism. So, what we understood there is that it is often associated with this. We are not sure that it definitely, the royalist ideology definitely followed or is linked with this particular patriarchalism. So, now these some historians are questioning this equation or this relationship, that whether royalist ideology was actually related to this patriarchalism or not. Maybe it was not even related. Maybe we are this linkage that we have created is incorrect, and the royalists maybe were not so much believers of male dominance or patriarchy, and that is why these women supported royalists or joined royalists. So that is what these historians are trying to say. Now, even if you were not clear with the meaning of this word facile, you can understand what it could be conveying. We are saying that these historians have questioned this relationship of royalist ideology with Filmarian patriarchalism. We know that this relationship or this equation is not absolutely established, it is not confirmed. So, facile can mean something like weak or not confirmed or oversimplified right? So you can get to a workable meaning. The meaning of the sentence is clear to you. From this sentence, you can understand what facile could mean. You can get to a workable meaning, and that is how you should be inferring the meaning of difficult words. Now, okay, so this is what some historians are doing. They are saying that maybe this relationship did not exist. This equation is incorrect. We should not be associating this royalist ideology with the male patriarchalism. It was not actually happening. And indeed, there may have been no consistent differences between royalists and parliamentarians on issues of family organization and women's political rights. Now, who is saying this? This is something that some historians are saying. But who is saying this? That there may have been no consistent differences. Who is saying this? This is being said by the author. The author is saying that, okay, yes, it is possible that there may have been no consistent differences, that the royalists and the parliamentarians had similar views about women's position, whether in family or in politics. They were equal, or they had same views. They were both supporting patriarchy, or they were both supporting women, or they were both neutral, whatever that was the case. Now, the use of this may have been shows that this is a hypothetical situation. The author is saying that, okay, this could have been true. It is possible that this was the case, right? So, author is bringing in a hypothetical scenario that, okay, let's consider a scenario in which there were no differences. The royalists and the parliamentarians, they were equal, or they treated the women equal in terms of their position in family and their political rights. Now, what would have happened in that case is what the author is going to present. But, so this is again a contrast. So, what is the issue if we consider this hypothetical scenario to be true? In that case, that is, if these royalists and parliamentarians had similar views on women's position or the issues related to family organization and women political rights, one would expect early feminists to be equally divided between the two sides. Very fair. If they were similar, if both of them had similar views, then why most of the women supported royalist side? These feminist women, they should have been almost equally distributed, right? Because both sides support feminism equally. They have similar views on feminism. They have similar views on women's position and women's political rights. So, in that case, if this hypothetical scenario was true, then these women should have been equally divided, almost equally divided in these two groups. So, in a way, the author is rejecting this explanation. The author is rejecting this hypothetical situation. The author is rejecting this situation in which, or this explanation that, okay, the royalists were maybe not following the patriarchalism given by Robert Filmer. So one particular explanation has been rejected here by the author. Now, what is this passage, this particular paragraph doing at an overall level? We have been given an odd but indisputable fact from history. We have been explained why this is odd. The author agrees to it, and then the author rejects one explanation. What, why that could have explained why this is odd. So, this is what this first paragraph is doing here. Let's read the second paragraph. Catherine Gallagher. So, we have a new person here. This is a person's name. We do not know who this person is. Let's read forward. Argues. So, this person argues something, that royalism engendered feminism. So, what is this person saying? It is saying that royalism, this particular royalism, it led to, or it caused feminism. Now, even if you don't know the meaning of engendered, you can just think that, okay, royalism is somehow related to feminism, and read further to understand that what it can mean. Let's read further. Because, so a reasoning has been given why this person is arguing that royalism led to feminism. Because the ideology of absolute monarchy. Now, what is this absolute monarchy? Can you link it with anything that you've already read? Yes, you can link it with the absolute power of king, which has been described with relation to the Filmarian patriarchalism. So you have to relate information that you are reading to what you have already read in order to make sense of what you are reading now. If you don't relate this information with what you have already read, you will not understand what the passage is saying, right? So this here, this ideology of absolute monarchy is actually the ideology that is often linked, that royalism is often linked with. That particular ideology provided a transition to, so it provided a switch to an ideology of the absolute self. So the ideology that royalism was following, that is the Filmarian, relate often associated with Filmarian patriarchalism, that led to another ideology which is of absolute self. Now we don't know what this means, but absolute self means, again, what is the self is all powerful, that is you yourself are all powerful or something like that, where this self is given this absolute power, something related to that. And the ideology being followed by royalism, it led to, or it helped switch to the ideology of absolute self, and that led to feminism. So that is how Catherine Gallagher is explaining why the women, the feminist women from the 17th century, the English women, why they joined royalist side even though they supported feminism. This particular person is saying that their joining royalism and royalism being linked with this kind of ideology, that actually gave rise to, or that actually produced feminism, because this particular ideology helped the women switch to ideology of absolute self, and that somehow led to feminism. Now let's read further to understand it better, what this absolute self means, how all of this is working. That is something that we expect to find in the rest of the passage. She cites. So she refers to Catherine Gallagher, and we know she has already made an argument and given a reasoning. Now let's read further. She cites the example of the notoriously eccentric author Margaret Cavendish, 1626 to 1673. Now this is again the 17th century. So this particular person, Catherine, made an argument, and she's giving an example of notoriously eccentric. Now, notoriously eccentric means someone who is not conventional, not the usual behavior that you see, not the usual personalities that you see. So this notoriously eccentric author, we are talking about an author here, and the author's name is Margaret Cavendish from the 17th century. Duchess of Newcastle. Duchess of Newcastle means she was not a commoner, she was the Duchess. So, Catherine Gallagher is giving an example of this particular author who is not a commoner from the 17th century to argue for her point. Let's see what she shows with this example. Cavendish, so this particular author, claimed to be as ambitious as any woman could be. So Cavendish's claim was that she is as ambitious as any woman could be. So she was ambitious. But contrast, knowing that as a woman, she was excluded from the pursuit of power in the real world. So we know that Cavendish was not a commoner. She was the Duchess of Newcastle. She was ambitious, she was very ambitious, but she knew her limitations. She knew that because she is a woman, she will not have that kind of power in real world. She cannot expect to have power in the real world. Why? Because in the real world, what are they following? They are following this absolute monarchy. They are saying that king and the male head, these are the absolute powers. So Cavendish knew that even if I'm ambitious, I don't have this power in real world. So what did she do? She resolved to be mistress of her own world. Now, what she decided? That I will be the mistress of my own world. Now, here we are talking about real world, which means the actual world which exists. And then we are saying in her own world. So she is creating some world of her own, right? Which may not be real. This may not be real because in real world she does not have these rights. So she resolved that okay, I'll be the mistress, I'll be the absolute power in my own world. And what is that world? The immaterial world that any person can create within her own mind. So, this her own world, as we could understand, this is not the real world, this is the immaterial world, this is the imaginary world that anyone, any person can create in their own mind. So, I can think that, okay, this is my world, these are my people, these are my rights, and I am the most powerful. That is what she did. She said that, okay, in my own world, I am the most powerful. And as a writer on paper. So this was one world, the imaginary world that she created. Secondly, because she was an author. So as a writer on paper, she said that, okay, I will be the mistress of my world on paper. Whatever world I create, whatever is my work, I will be mistress in, I will be the most powerful in those worlds. Now, do you understand what this absolute self could have meant? We were not sure what this absolute self meant, but we thought that okay, someone themselves is the most powerful or something. And yes, it is a similar thing. This absolute self here actually meant that a person is powerful in their own world. So because everyone was following this ideology of monarchy, that okay, the king is the most powerful. So Cavendish said that okay, I cannot have any power in the real world. So I'll create a world of my own and I will be the most powerful there. So, from this ideology of absolute monarchy, she transitioned to the ideology of absolute self. So, this relationship, this understanding is clear now that what this absolute self meant. Now, let's read further in proclaiming what she called her singularity. So there is something that she called her singularity. It is in double quotes. So this is something that Cavendish used this word exactly. So the author is quoting that word that she proclaimed what she called her singularity. Proclaim means she was not just quietly thinking about it. She announced this to the world. She was open about it. She talked to people about it. She proclaimed it, and she called it her singularity. So let's understand this singularity better. Cavendish insisted that she was a self sufficient being within her mental empire. So, Cavendish, what did she say? That I believe that I am self sufficient. I don't need anyone in my mental empire, the center of her own subjective universe, rather than a satellite orbiting a dominant male planet. So, the one thing that is mentioned here is that she is self sufficient in her mental empire, in her own world. She is self sufficient. She does not need anyone. She is not dependent on anyone and she is the center of her own subjective universe. Center of her own universe means she is the main character there. She is the main character in her own universe rather than a satellite orbiting a dominant male planet, means a woman moving around that patriarchy supporter man. So she's saying that instead of going around the male head or subordinating to the male head or basically being the secondary one when male head is present, instead of going around that dominant male planet, so the male head or the male dominance has been equated to a dominant male planet and a woman who has to subordinate in marriage or is secondary to this male head is compared to a satellite that is going around this male planet. And if you understand, the satellite will always go around the male planet. If you relate it to the solar system, because that is the easiest thing to do to understand it better. If Earth is revolving and earth is revolving around the sun and moon is revolving around the earth, the moon will always follow the earth. The moon cannot go anywhere else. The satellite does not have its own independent path. It will always go around this planet. So that is how she compared that. As in the real world, the women is like always dependent on the male planet, going around the male planet, but in my own universe I am self sufficient. I am not dependent on anyone and I am the center of this subjective universe. So this is how she proclaimed her singularity, that as a single person I am sufficient. And again, you can relate it back to this concept of ideology of absolute self. Let's read further. Justifying this absolute singularity. So she also justified this concept of absolute singularity. Cavendish repeatedly invoked the model of the absolute monarch. Now, again, this model is being referred, the model of absolute monarchy. And this is how the link between royalism and this transition that this led to this ideology of absolute self. Because remember, Catherine is using this example to convey that royalism led to feminism. So, this sentence connects how the ideology that was linked with royalism, which is about absolute monarchy, it was used by Cavendish to convey that this concept is absolutely applicable to individuals also. I can be the absolute power in my own world. a figure that became a metaphor. So this figure, this absolute monarch term, it became a metaphor for the self-enclosed, autonomous nature of the individual person. That at individual level, the person is self-sufficient, they are complete, they don't need anyone else, they are all powerful, and that is how Cavendish justified her concept of singularity. So overall, you can see how Cavendish used the concept of absolute monarchy to arrive at the concept of or the ideology of absolute self, where she became all powerful. She kind of used this model of absolute monarchy to reject that same model in her own world. In real world, she had to follow it, but she found a different route, a different way in which she made herself absolute powerful. She had her own power, she had her own world. And that is how, with this example, Catherine Gallagher is saying that royalism itself, the ideology of patriarchalism, it itself led to feminism because it provided this transition from the ideology of absolute monarchy to the ideology of absolute self. It gave women this idea that you are self sufficient, you have your own world, you can create your own world, you can be absolutely powerful in your own world. You need not be dependent. Cavendish's successors among early feminists. So now we are talking about the successors of Margaret Cavendish and who were among early feminists. So now we are again talking about this link between royalism and feminism. Retained her notion of women's sovereign self. So this is what they continued, but, so this is the contrast, they also sought to break free from the complete political and social isolation that her absolute singularity entailed. So, in Cavendish's theory, she was the most powerful in her own world, but her successors, they said that yes, women have that kind of power, women have that kind of right, but women need not isolate themselves from the actual world. They can have that kind of power in the real world also. So they retained something from the ideology of Cavendish, and they dropped some part of it, and that is how Catherine Gallagher is saying that the the ideology of absolute monarchy led Cavendish come up with the ideology of absolute self, and then this was carried forward by her successors who dropped the isolation part. So they they basically supported these rights or feminism in the real world, and that is how this ideology of absolute monarchy, which is related to royalism, it led to feminism. So that is the entire argument of Catherine. This is how, with this example, Catherine is trying to provide explanation of the link between royalism and feminism, which was the odd fact that the author presented in the first paragraph. Now, at the passage level, the first paragraph presents an odd fact, plus it rejects one explanation for this odd fact. The second paragraph presents another explanation, and this explanation has not been rejected nor accepted. This is just presented. So overall, if we see, this passage presents an odd fact and provides an explanation, a particular person's explanation that can explain this odd fact. Now, if you ask me what were the skills required to understand this passage, I would say that the first thing was to read in small chunks. I did not read complete sentences, and that is not just for explanation. Whenever I'm reading something and there's a long sentence, there's a complicated sentence, I always break down that sentence into smaller parts, understandable parts. For example, this thing, I did not read it in one go, this first sentence itself. This is a very long sentence. I broke it down into multiple parts. I kept understanding each part, and then I moved forward. The second thing is understand each word. You need to understand what each and every word is conveying. This small word odd, which is actually the fourth word of this passage, it gives you an idea of what this passage is going to be like, what it is going to talk about, the contrast that is being presented, the puzzle that is being presented. Everything was clear from this word itself. So always try to understand each and every word, and that is why reading in small chunks is important. We understood each word here, and then we were able to understand that what is the author, what is something that we are not clear with till now, based on the information, what the author might tell us in the next part, or when the author is giving that answer, we are able to relate it back to what the author has already said. And even if there's a word which is not very clear to you, maybe this one, or maybe this one, or maybe any other word, especially in humanity passages, one thing is, if you are required to know that word exactly, meaning of that word exactly, you will be given an explanation for that. For example, here this patriarchalism has been explained in detail. So that explanation is provided. That exact explanation will be given to you if you are expected to know the exact meaning. However, if that exact meaning is not required, you can come up with a workable meaning from the context. Try to question that what are the possible meanings of this word, and what does this sentence, the way everything has been written, what does this convey? What is the possible meaning? So even if you come with a close to the correct meaning, if even if you can come up with that kind of meaning, it works because you are not expected to know the exact meaning, right? So understand the meaning of each word and infer it from the context. If it is not, if you do not know that word, infer from the context. The third skill, which is like almost very important. Yes, these two are really important, but even with these two, if you do not have this third skill, you will not be able to understand it, this particular passage. And this third skill is relating what you are reading to what you have read. So, at every point in this passage, you will see that the information is very much related to what you have already read. If you have missed this odd, then this entire explanation will not be clear to you. Why is the author talking about it? Now, if you have not understood that this royalism is often linked with radical patriarchalism, then you will not understand why Catherine Gallagher is trying to relate both of these. So, everything, this absolute monarchy here, the ideology of absolute monarchy, what does it refer to? If you don't relate it back to what you have read in the first paragraph, you will not be able to completely understand the entire meaning here. And that is why it is very important to relate whatever you are reading now with what you have already read in the passage. So these three skills, I would say, are a must for this particular passage. All right, so we are done solving the passage now. Hope you have a good understanding of the passage. Try solving the questions on your own now and see how accurately and how confidently you can get to the answers. We will soon be sharing videos explaining the questions as well. You can use those videos to verify your analysis. Good luck.